Hello and again, and welcome back to another HD streaming prelude. I'm Carol Anderson, principal coach of the Utah Opera. Normally, I would be welcoming you to a prelude talk at the Capitol Theater, but I'm happy to replace that right now with a greeting from my living room. So tonight we're talking about Richard Strauss's opera Capriccio. This was Strauss's last opera, and full disclosure, I'm a big Strauss fan, so I'll try not to geek out too much. Little introduction about Richard Strauss. For those of you who listen to my talks on Rosenkavalier or Elektra, you may not need this review, but I'll try to keep it quick. Strauss was born in Munich in 1864. His father was a very well-known horn player named Franz Strauss, and this is evident in Strauss's writing. He writes amazing horn lines always, and I'm sure it was just because he grew up hearing the sound of the French horn in his own home. Strauss was an early starter, as most professional musicians end up being. He started piano at age 4, composition at age 6. He was also a conducting prodigy, relatively speaking. He was the assistant to the great conductor Klaus von Bülow, and then succeeded him as conductor at Meiningen, Germany, at age 21. He left that post in Meiningen to travel through Italy, and then upon his return, he became the chief conductor at the Bavarian State Opera in Munich. His time in Munich was not completely happy as far as work was concerned, but he did conduct in other cities as a guest, including Leipzig, where he met Gustav Mahler. He also met his future wife, dramatic soprano Paulina de Anna, who was contracted to the Bavarian State Opera. It was a little bit of a Svengali thing. Paulina had another voice teacher, and Strauss met her and convinced her to study with him. And then, of course, the studies moved on to a less professional footing, shall we say. They did collaborate as conductor and singer, though, several times, including a performance of Tannhäuser in Bayreuth in 1894, in which he conducted and Paulina played Elisabeth. Strauss's third opera, Salome, premiered in 1905, was the one that really put him on the opera map, so to speak. He also that year started his partnership with Hugo von Hofmannsthal, which ended up being one of the great composer-librettist pairings of opera history, similar to the magic that was created by Mozart and Da Ponte. Those two collaborated on 6 operas, from Elektra in 1909 to Arabella in 1933. Strauss also collaborated with the Jewish author by the name of Stefan Zweig for an opera called Die Schweigsame Frau, or The Silent Woman. Now, this is Strauss has an interesting and sort of controversial history with the Nazi Party, based on the fact, he didn't leave Germany during the Nazi regime and such like that. But he did have small actions of rebellion against the Nazis, and one involved Stefan Zweig. The Nazi regime insisted that Zweig's name be removed from the program of Schweigsame Frau because he was Jewish, and Strauss refused to allow this to happen. So, when that work premiered in 1935. Zweig is significant tonight because he provided the spark that led to this opera Capriccio. He was researching in the British Museum. He had to flee Germany eventually for London, and so while he was in London, he was researching the British Museum. And in 1934, he came upon a short comedy by a librettist named Giovanni Battista Casti, who was a rival of Mozart's librettist Da Ponte. The name of this work was Prima la musica e poi le parole, which means first the music and then the words. It had been set to music by Mozart's own rival and colleague, Salieri. And in fact, the premiere of Prima la musica e poi le parole shared its Schönbrunn Palace premiere with Die Schauspieldirektor of Mozart. Schauspieldirektor, or the impresario, is about the production aspects of opera, for instance. A good portion of that goes along 2 rival sopranos vying for the same role. That never happens. And then Casti and Salieri created a work that was talking about the words versus music dichotomy. Which one is more important? Which one needs to come first? All of these things. it becomes about the nature of art, and that's in fact what Capriccio does. It becomes a larger discourse on the nature of art. The idea of music versus words, though not the plot of that little one-act opera, seized Zweig's imagination, so he suggested it as a inspiration for Strauss, and Strauss took the ball and ran with it. So after Zweig's escape from Germany, Austria, Strauss worked on 3 operas with Josef Gregor, who contributed some text to Capriccio, but the majority of the text was written by Clemens Krauss. Capriccio is subtitled A Conversation Piece for Music, ein Konversationsstück für Musik in einem Aufzug, in one act. It's quite a long act. If they do it in the one act version, it's a little bit over 2 hours. But we'll talk about that a little bit. It's a very talky opera where there's a lot of text, and perhaps the emphasis is less on melody. There are a lot of melodic moments that are quite beautiful and amazing. And of course, it ends with a very famously gorgeous monologue for soprano. Little side note, because of his association with Paulina, it's clear that Strauss had a thing for these sopranos. And so some of his most beautiful music is written for that gorgeous lyric or more dramatic soprano voice, and Capriccio is no exception to that. The opera, it philosophizes, a little tongue-twisted today, tongue-tied, also on just the nature of art. It talks about, what's first, the music with the words, then how does the actor or the interpreter figure, and the director. It kind of goes further into it than just words versus music. It's originally, like I said, meant to be performed in one act, but as I say, it's quite a long act. I think that tonight's performance is in one act because I did not see in the synopsis any mention of an intermission, but I don't swear to that. A few years after its premiere, to help make it a little bit easier for the audience, there was a director that inserted an intermission after the Countess asks for chocolate to be brought to her. So if you need an intermission in tonight and there's not one provided, you can pause after she gets her chocolate and you can do whatever you need to do, because you control the intermissions in these broadcasts that you're enjoying from the comfort of your home. So the esoteric nature of this plot has never really captured audiences in the same way that the thrills and action of Salome or something like that seems to have, or even Rosenkavalier's long, but it has a little bit more humanity to its plot. I love Capriccio, don't get me wrong, but there are certain challenges to mounting a production of Capriccio that maybe don't exist in some of Strauss's other works. The American premiere of Capriccio took place at my summer home, the Santa Fe Opera, in 1958. Santa Fe Opera for a long time was a place where Strauss's operas were celebrated. It was a particular passion of the founder of Santa Fe Opera, John Crosby. And we did a production in 2016 that I was able to work on and play the harpsichord in the orchestra. So Capriccio is one of those that I've really enjoyed being a part of. So which is greater, the poetry or the music? That is the theme of this opera. The opera is set at the country house of the Countess Madeline. We open with a string quartet rehearsing a new work by the composer Flamant. And this has one little seed in it that shows up throughout the opera. That little da-da-da-da. Happens throughout. Usually in the orchestra, it's rarely actually sung. It's kind of an awkward line to be sung. So this sextet that opens the opera is actually a piece that's often excerpted for chamber orchestras to perform on their own. It's really a spectacular, beautiful ensemble. actually meet the characters in the opera. So the Countess Madeline has a little bit of a different, not only is there a different a conflict between words and music in the esoteric artistic sense, but there is a actual conflict between words and music in that both the poet Olivier and the composer Flamant are in love with the Countess, and she cannot choose between them. So it's the struggle between words and music actually has a human component as well. And they actually quote the words of that first inspiring Salieri opera. So in a conversation between Flamant just a few pages later and Olivier, Olivier says, Wort oder Ton. And then sie wird es entscheiden. And then Olivier's so Wort oder Ton is words or pitch. And then later Olivier says, prima le parole, dopo la musica. So he's advocating for words first. Flamant says, prima la musica, dopo le parole. And then Olivier says, Ton und Wort, and the word und, which means and, is specifically underlined in the score. And then Flamant says, sind Brüder und Schwester. And he says they are brother and sister. There's also a human quality of the Count and Countess being brother and sister too, so there's a lot of little layers that you can unpack. And then Olivier says, ein gewagter Vergleich, which is like an interesting comparison. German, I'm giving you very paraphrased German things. It will give you the sense, though. Some people are confused, by the way. You can turn on, if you have been wondering why you don't have super titles on your Met feed, there is a place in the settings where you can turn them on. I think that question has come up a couple of times with people that I've seen commenting. So just a little sideline. So here's that little section, and we'll still have that little C. Da 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 da. Wort oder Ton. Sie wird uns entscheiden. Prima le parole, dopo la musica. Prima la musica, dopo le parole. Schwester, ein gewagter Vergleich. And that's actually typically the end of the sextet if it's excerpted right there, but there's already been a little bit of opera happening. So Olivier brings the Countess a sonnet that he has just written, and he reads it to her. And at one point, the onstage musicians do add a little bit onto it. So there's a little bit of underlying music, but mostly it's just a reading. Olivier, my German reading, I'll do the best I can. Dein Auge beut mir himmlisch süße Not. Und wenn ein Aufschlag alle Qual vermehrte, eine andere Wonne mir und Lust gewährte, zwei Schläge sind dann Leben oder Tod. Then he continues to read. Und trüg ich's 5-mal 100.000 Jahre. Er hielte außer dich, du Wunderbarer, kein anderes Wesen über mich Gewalt. And that's on the harpsichord happening from the orchestra. So you'll see it's a little bit unmeasured and free while he continues to read. The Countess says, what a fantastic poem that is. But then later, Flamant runs off and comes back with a musical setting of that same sonnet to bring to fruition his point that the music is necessary and important. And this is where we're, so let's see. Yeah, I'll go from the Dein Auge, which is where he began to read in the part I did. Then when you add it to music, you get Dein Auge. does that amazing thing where he says, two glances can then be life or death from a lover. And so he says, Lieben is very shiny and happy, and then or death. So, I mean, I advocate that the two can't exist without each other, but in opera especially. And then, but the discourse shall continue. The discourse continues with the addition of, we have the director who's come in a little before this. And the director, of course, brings up the point that you need the interpreters to really fully make the art come to life. And then the actress, of course, Clairvaux, feels like her part of the process is very important. And then we have two Italian singers who come in and sing a duet in Italian. And then the whole gang has a whole sort of discourse and discussion, all kinds of ridiculous little argument, which escalates. And it's almost like one of those Mozart chain finales where it becomes progressively faster and more frantic as the drama gets a little more heated. I'm not going to go to the fast bit. This ensemble goes on for a bit, and you don't need to hear me just play it because it's not interesting without 8 voices singing. And oddly enough, I cannot be 8 people. Maybe I could be like 4, but 8 is way too many. So this fun beginning is has a lot of these little string figurations that we've heard. Lots of those will happen throughout, and then in this particular case, the director is talking about his idea for a directorial theatrical event, and everyone's amused and laughing, and says that to themselves they're saying ha 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 ha. So it's the laughing octet, if you will. Listen to also how the harmonies go very unexpectedly and surprisingly. It's just so Straussian to make these quick modulations. Ha 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 ha. So forth. And these third relationships are a very important harmonic thing that Strauss does. This is basically, in this moment, it's in B flat, but then we go down a third to the pitch G, and then we flat it, and we have this relationship of G flat. And then if you go up a third and then flat it, you go to D flat. So G flat, B flat. Fun relationships. We call those mediant relationships because mediant refers to a note that's a third away from the tonic, whether it's the supermediant above or the submediant below. So as we move on, we also get the addition of dancers, and different productions handle this different ways. In Santa Fe, we actually did have some dancers to the music of our friend Flamant, supposedly, / Strauss. And there's several kind of ancient or older dance styles. There's like a bourrée and a passe-pied and one other. And it's performed off die Bühne, which means off stage. In our case, we did it in Santa Fe from the pit, and it was the harpsichord, me, the violin, solo violin and solo cello. So it's a fun little ensemble. Again, some more stuff that you can excerpt for a small group. With these dances happening as kind of like background music, music that is coming out of the orchestra that the cast is actually reacting to. So it's music that's existing in their world as opposed to music that is the background of the orchestra, the subconscious world. So later on, Laroche, the director, as he's done throughout, he's advocating for the old methods of theater, and he actually challenges the young upstarts, Flamant and Olivier, to create a meaningful work. And the Count, who has already said several times that he has no ear for music or no real interest for it, though he has a great ear for, or great interest in actors, and ends up sort of flirting and running off to have dinner with Clairon. So they make a little connection, a little love connection. So he says, I wish to propose a theme. Write an opera as if you wish. With conflict that we've already happened. Write about yourselves, this day that we had, and what we've all lived. Write and compose an opera. Write and compose this day as an opera. So it's like very meta, because it's like we watch an opera about their day, and then it's left with the composer and the librettist needing to write an opera about the day that we just saw an opera about. So see, it's an endless circle. And Olivier responds to this, that's a really great idea. And Flamant says that no one can deny, so they run off to do this. So this is the music, and we'll hear some more of these themes that we've heard throughout. Ich wüsste ein äußerst fesselndes Thema, schreibt eine Oper, wie sie sich wünscht. Schildert euch selbst, der Ereignisses des heutigen Tag, was wir alle erlebt, und komponiert es als Oper, ein verblüffender Einfall, das ist nicht zu leugnen. And we're hearing more of those relationships, those mediant relationships that I just told you about. So it's very talky opera and hard to kind of get all the words out, so I apologize for that. I have not practiced it as I was back in 2016 when I was playing the whole show. My practice has been a little bit different. And then as Flamant and Olivier are leaving, they go back to this original argument of prima le parole, dopo la musica, but they have switched their ideas. So Flamant, the composer, says, prima le parole, dopo la musica, afterwards, the music. The words are important, are der Vorrang, and the first thing. And then Olivier, the poet, says, nein, no, der Musik, doch geboren aus dem Wort, that is born from the words. And then Flamant says, prima la musica, sie hat entschieden. And then Olivier says, ja, für das Wort. They came for the words. Prima le parole. So the conversation is not over. They've kind of gotten to where they can see each other's ideas, but it's not finished. So, prima le parole, dopo la musica, dem Worte der Vorrang. Nein, der Musik, doch geboren aus dem Wort, prima la musica, sie hat entschieden, and so forth. So they go off to do their work. Now we are left with one thing. We don't know how this opera ends because the Countess has not made her choice. So she comes in to choose, they ask her to choose the ending of the opera. So she has this quite long monologue that's introduced with this very beautiful, it's like the Pathétique Sonata on the piano. that starts in A flat major. Then we have a nice modulation that's very beautiful. It's a really long, beautiful interlude for the orchestra. Goes on with that tune several times, gets more Strauss with lots of flow. And then Madeleine sings this glorious monologue. And then the last thing she has to say to herself, she's like, can I possibly create an ending for this? Find this at den Schluss für ihre Oper. Den Schluss für ihre Oper. And she says, gibt es einen? Is there one that is not trivial? And we're in nice A flat major, der nicht trivial ist, and this is the last line she sings, and it's left with this, a question, and it goes on, and then her servant comes in and offers dinner, and she goes off, and we don't ever know whom she chooses, but I love that questioning harmony. That's meant to leave us uncertain as to how things are ending. So I hope you enjoy discovering a lesser-known Strauss masterpiece. And I love bringing these lectures to you, and I will look forward to seeing you another night. Thank you for supporting opera from Utah or wherever you may be listening from wherever you may be listening. And thanks to our friends Judy Brady and Drew Browning, who are always wonderful supporters of the opera and are making these live streams possible. Stay safe and keep your hands washed and be good to one another. Thank you.